Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to Policy and Practice's December webinar. We're delighted that you can join us this morning. Today's webinar is What Next for Post-Furlough Employment Support. My name is Janet Harkin, and it's great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, just while we wait for more people to join us, I'd just like to do some very quick housekeeping. And those of you who have been on our webinars before will be very familiar with this, but if you could give me an audio check by raising your digital hand to the right in the panel on the right hand side, that would be great, and I will be able to know that you can hear us. Thank you. In the same panel, you'll be able to see where you can ask questions, so please do ask questions of our panelists throughout the webinar. We'll have plenty of time at the end to get to them. In that same panel, there is a download for you to take at any time. So do please take a look at that, and we'll have a short survey at the very end of the webinar, which would be grateful if you could fill in, just to help us improve. We aim to have you on your way by 11 o'clock this morning, so we're a bit thrown because we normally do our webinars at a different time, but we're finishing today at 11, so that's when you have you on your way. And the slides and the recording will automatically follow. If you're on Twitter, it'd be great if you want to give us a follow. We are at policy_practice. So yeah, we shall follow you back if you follow us. Thank you everybody for the raised hands. Great that you can hear us. Just very quickly, for those of you who might be new to Policy and Practice, just want to give 2 brief minutes about who we are. So we're an organisation that believes in the power of technology and data to change lives, and basically the way that we do that, you might know us actually from our policy work. You might have seen us give presentations of evidence to parliamentary committees, because we're quite well known for our policy work. We're a team of professionals with extensive knowledge of the welfare system, and we're all passionate about making social policy work. So yes, you might have seen us there and in the media as well. We also have our data analytics area where we help well over 100 local authorities to use their household level data to identify vulnerable households, target support and track change over time. But today I suppose we're going to be highlighting our final area, which is our benefit and budgeting calculator, our award-winning benefit and budgeting calculator. So proud of that. You can find it listed on gov.uk, and it engages over 10,000 people every day, and it helps people to take steps to increase their income, lower their costs and build their financial strength. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and and hear from some of our clients about how they use it. Brilliant. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today in our agenda is employment and benefits trends, just to sort of see where we are right now in the moment, and then we're going to get some early reflections 6 months in on the Restart programme from one of the Restart programme providers, so we're delighted about that. Equally so, we're delighted to have a local authority that's going to talk to us about successful employment support that they deliver. And as I say, plenty of time for Q&A, and then we're going to have a brief demo of the software as well for those that can stay. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So let me stop talking and introduce you to our speakers. If I may ask speakers to unmute themselves and put their cameras on to say hello. That would be great. Yeah, so we've got Devin Galani, Director and Founder of Policy and Practice. Good morning, Devin.
Hi everyone.
And we've also got Ayden Sims, delighted to welcome Ayden Sims, Business Director from Maximus. Good morning, Ayden.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us. Also delighted to welcome Sally Davy from who's Redbridge Housing Integration Officer from London Borough of Redbridge. Good morning, Sally.
Morning.
Good morning. And also Sunita Gunamal, Redbridge Advisor from London Borough of Redbridge. Good morning, Sally. Sorry, Sunita. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
And I've also got my colleague Ed McNamara from Policy and Practice, who will be joining us shortly. Thank you very much. So I think without further ado, what I'm going to do now is hand over to Devin. Over to you. Thanks, Devin.
Thank you, Janet. If we just move forward, I'm going to talk about 3 areas, just 3 high-level views around policy. The first slide is going to be on how employment's holding up. The headline is it's holding up better than expected, given the context of the pandemic. The second slide is going to be about the government's plan for jobs and the range of additional support and funding, but also just the wide range of schemes that are available and who might be eligible for them, and what that means for the pattern of employment support. And the third slide is going to be on the budget. So the implications for universal credit, what the increased generosity means for if you're supporting people into work. So very dense, but I want to leave as much time as possible for covering those three topics across 3 slides, but I want to leave as much time for Sally, Sunita and Ayden to talk about the practical side of how they're actually supporting people into work. So in terms of the changing outlook for employment, it's holding up better than expected. Unemployment peaked at 5.3%. When we were working in the midst of the pandemic and modelling this for some of the local authorities, we were using the official forecasts and official estimates, and they had unemployment forecasts. The OBR predicted 11.9%. So we're about half, it's about half the level forecast at its peak to what was expected. There are some important trends, though, as ever. Younger and older people struggle more through this in slightly different ways in this case. So you can see in the second bullet, 16 to 24-year-old employment was at 52.2% versus 75.2% for all working age. It's always a little bit lower for younger people in any case, but what I think really highlights this point is that it fell more sharply for younger people during the pandemic than it did for working age. So it has had a bigger impact on younger people. At the same time, the number of job vacancies rose to a new record of 1.2 million. There's more vacancies out there than there's ever been, I think. And the challenge is, and which is why employment support is so important, the challenge is helping people to access those job opportunities, feel confident in going for them, and in some cases skilling them up, but also just ensuring that they just know that they're there and they have the confidence to apply. And then I mentioned younger people. With older people, the bigger issues is certainly economic inactivity. So that's risen. You can see in the chart at the bottom there, it's risen to 21.1%. So quite a sharp increase from pre-pandemic, which is its, from the bottom there. It's still considerably below the levels in the sort of 2010 sort of post-crash. So I think that's it's still probably a better outlook than perhaps it's first perceived, and you can see how that's broken down by different groups. But yeah, those are the headlines I've pulled out in terms of employment holding up better overall, with certain groups struggling, but there are employment opportunities out there. Next slide, please, Janet. Then it's worth, the government's response to the pandemic was its plan for jobs. You can see 5 of those areas in the bar chart are part of the government's plan for jobs. So a range of employment support programs designed to help people into work. There's the Sector Work-Based Academy program, which is really only just getting underway, I'd say. JETS is the one that's taking off the most. You can see that that's supporting a lot of people. The spend is really an indication of success, actually, because the more successful these schemes are, generally the more spent they are, because you've got people actually engaging with them. So it's almost a measure of engagement. So you've got JETS, the Job Entry Targeted Support Scheme. You've got Kickstart. You've got DWP doing it themselves. So by doubling the number of work coaches in job centres, they recruited, I think, 15,000 staff during the pandemic. And you've got the Restart Scheme, which Ayden will talk about. And I think what's striking about the Restart Scheme is just how young it is in its lifetime. So it's only just kicked off. In total, across those schemes, there's been £1.6 billion spent, with a further £5.1 billion available to be spent, provided the demand is out there, provided well, the demand is certainly out there, but provided people can access the support. And it's worth mentioning as well, I think this chart around the plan for jobs excludes provision that was already there, so local authority provision that existed pre-pandemic and also exists post-pandemic, and also a lot of provision that was ESF funded too. So it'd be interesting to know from Redbridge how their employment support schemes are funded, and where they seek that funding from, how much of it comes from the local authority and how much of it comes from elsewhere. So that's a little bit about the schemes and the range of support, and I think there is quite a lot of support out there. It's got quite a complex web for people trying to access it. There was one local authority I spoke with recently who have a scheme simply to triage people into the right employment support scheme. To me, it's interesting that that's a necessary part of the employment support landscape. And then the third slide is on the changes to universal credit. So we heard a lot about this in the budget. We think they're wholly positive, unfortunately against the backdrop of some cuts to universal credit as well at the same time. So what was announced in the budget is the universal credit withdrawal rate falling from 63% to 55%. What that means is for each pound that you earned, universal credit was withdrawn by 63 pence in the pound. Now it's going to be withdrawn by 55 pence in the pound, which means people get to keep 45 pence of each pound that they earn if they're on universal credit. So slight simplification, because universal credit is withdrawn on net income. So that's true for every pound earned below the tax threshold. As you go above the national insurance and income tax threshold, you pay income tax and national insurance as well. And then from that, the 55% is withdrawn from the remainder. There's a table showing exactly how withdrawal rates change in the blog, which is available on these slides, and you can link to it at the bottom. But I won't get into the detail of it. It's on the whole, people get to keep quite a bit more of each pound that they earn if they're working on universal credit. Alongside that, you've seen, or you will see, national minimum wage increase to £9.50 from April 2022. And it affects slightly more people as well. So whereas before it's 25 plus, it's now I think 23 plus. And what's interesting about these changes is that they are wholly positive, but they really only benefit households in work. So if you're not in work, whereas during the pandemic, people on universal credit got an additional £1,000 per week, that's been withdrawn. And what you see in the modelling and in the chart on the right hand side is the green line shows what happens with the budget, and the dark green line shows the budget changes for people at different earnings levels, and the light green line bar chart shows what happens when you with the loss of the £20 uplift. And you can see that you have to be earning a fair amount, so at least £1,000 per month, for these budget changes to offset the loss of the £20 per week uplift. So this is the government really saying we're going for an employment first approach to tackling poverty. Now that does leave a lot of people, particularly those who are out of work, either on universal credit or on legacy benefits, really struggling, and helping them to access not just employment support but other financial support as well is something that obviously we at Policy and Practice feel very passionate about and help people to do through the benefit calculator and Lift. So households need to earn at least £1,000 per month to offset the loss, which means people earning part-time might struggle more than those earning full-time, and it's still going to be a challenging picture financially for people. We've got more and more people moving on to universal credit. The government's announced or has been talking now about managed migration, so encouraging people on legacy benefits onto universal credit, either voluntarily if they're certain that they can be better off, and some people can, and that was certainly true during the pandemic, where you had the £20 uplift applied to universal credit, or ultimately through managed migration. So ultimately they are looking to close down the legacy benefit system for working age households. The final point I'd make is these interactions are complex, so it isn't just about looking at their earnings levels. It really depends about what benefits that they're on, their individual personal circumstances, and we'd recommend anyone they're thinking about moving into work or moving from legacy benefits onto universal credit, that they do carry out a personalised check through our benefit calculator or one of the others. So that's a summary of the policy backdrop. So you've got a stronger than expected employment situation. It'd be interesting to know whether that's being felt by colleagues on the call. We've got universal credit, which is there to support and encourage people into work, and you've got a whole range of additional employment support out there for people to find and navigate. Janet, it's probably good to move on to, I'm not sure if we've got a poll next or if we're going to yeah.
We do, Devon. Yeah, lovely. Thanks ever so much, Devon. That's fantastic. And I'm sure people will have questions as well. So please do pop them into the panel. As you say, Devon, it's a sort of relatively complex picture. So let me just do the first poll. which hopefully you should see on your screen coming up right now. There we go. So what we would love to hear from you, the audience, is what, in your experience, is the biggest barrier to providing the right support to people? And we've got a number of different options here. And as you probably know with our polls, we want you to choose the biggest option or the most extreme option. And indeed, you know, appreciative that there's probably a range of different ones that you would choose from, but choose the one that is the most prevalent. So is it, as Devon says, the complexity of the support available? Is it identifying, engaging the right people? Is it incentivizing take-up? Is it matching the provision to need? That triage point that Devon talked about, or is it indeed the logistics of dealing with this post-peak that we're finding in the COVID pandemic? So yeah, I can see lots of votes coming in. Thank you very much. I'll just leave it for a tiny bit longer before then asking Devon to comment, and then Ayden as well. So brilliant. Okay, interesting results. Let me close the poll and then share these on the screen for everybody to see. Hopefully you should see them. Devon, what would your thoughts be on those results?
Thanks, Janet. Well, clearly it's something we stand for at Policy and Practices, to try to make government policy simple to understand. And I think a big driver of that is that it's very complex. So it's not surprising to see the complexity of support available, knowing what's out there to refer people to, knowing to identify and engage the right people for the right scheme. So some of these schemes are for younger people, some will be for older people, and actually if you build a relationship with one scheme but there's someone whose eligibility criteria doesn't fit, that can be a bit of a challenge. Yeah, and so that to me isn't a surprise, but it'd be interesting to know what the other speakers think too.
Ayden, would you care to comment?
No, absolutely, thank you. So I very much agree with Devon's sentiment there. I think that those top two, which have come out as the top scoring there, it doesn't surprise me at all. I'd say they're sort of two parts of the same challenge around the identification and navigation of the support that's available. And you know, in some ways it's a nice problem to have, that there is a breadth of provision out there for people to access, but often the challenge, particularly at a local level, is helping individuals find their way through that and critically understand where there is opportunities for those provisions to complement one another and have multiple services running alongside rather than either or. So it's I know it's a key challenge that we're certain, and I can spend a bit of time talking about this shortly, but it's certainly an area that I know that we're keen to work hard with local organisations and individuals on. Absolutely.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you, Ayden. And as you say, let me finish hiding that poll and then hand over straight to you, Ayden, for your piece. Thank you ever so much, Ayden.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can see me. I've got my camera on, but I can't see myself on the screen anymore, as I could see Devon. So hopefully you can see and hear me okay. So thank you. I'm Ayden Sims. I'm the contract director for responsible for the Maximus Restart Scheme delivery, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what that means in a moment. Just in the next few minutes, and like Devon, I'm keen to try and be relatively brisk in my presentation, just because I'm obviously keen to see if there's any questions or theory that the team have. But so I want to talk to you a little bit about Maximus, in case you don't know who we are, and then I'm going to share a little bit about what Restart is and who it's designed to support. We've been delivering the scheme now for around 6 months, so I'd like to talk a little bit about those reflections in that first 6 months and what we've experienced. Partnership is a key piece of our delivery approach, so I'm keen to share a few thoughts on that, and then talk a little bit about what our experience and observations are around the work we're doing in Redbridge at the moment, which obviously we've got colleagues from Redbridge on the call, and they can talk far more eloquently about Redbridge than I will attempt to. And then hopefully, provided the technology works, we've got a bit of a case study video that I'd be great to be able to share with you, and so you can see a single example of some of the support that we've been offering so far, and then just a couple of thoughts on what next for Restart for the future. So so hopefully I'll be able to cover that relatively eloquently. So just to start with, sorry, there's aha, there we are. I can see myself now, so I'm not sure if you can. So a little bit about Maximus. We're one of the leading providers of employment skills and disability programs in the UK, and we deliver services both in the UK and internationally. And certainly in the UK, we've been delivering services in combination with our sister organisation, Remploy now, who I actually joined nearly 15 years ago, for over 70 years, since the end of the Second World War. And so we've got a really extensive experience of delivering employment and skills support, particularly to those with potentially the most complex barriers and challenges, to help them move back into sustainable and meaningful work. And to date, we've helped over 250,000 people to find work and develop skills and hopefully transform their lives, which we're obviously really passionate about. We deliver currently a large number of programs of differing scales and natures right across the UK. I'll talk a lot about Restart in a moment, but in addition, we deliver the Work and Health programme in Wales and in partnership with Redbridge in London. We're delivering the innovative health-focused services in Greater Manchester, as well as a range of other provisions aimed at perhaps addressing more health or technical areas, such as the Access to Work Mental Health Support Service, and a really small localised provision commissioned by the West Midlands Combined Authority called Connecting Communities. So really a breadth of services, from the large-scale national services to really localised community-based solutions, and in all of that, it's understanding the key barriers and challenges to the individuals joining those schemes and how best to support them that's key. Next slide, please. So, what is the Restart scheme? So Devon obviously trailed the fact that it's a real central part of the government's plan for jobs. It's the budget set aside in the original concept for Restart was 2.9 billion, and it's commissioned by the Department for Work and Pensions. So what that means is, over the time scale that the Restart scheme will run, it's actually the largest employment provision that the department has ever procured. Work programme, some of you may be familiar with, a few years ago, is the nearest equivalent, and the value overall isn't far apart. The actual time of which that delivery will run means that Restart is the largest programme that's been procured. As you might expect, it was in direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic impacts that that's had, and the large numbers of people who have unfortunately found themselves out of work. And so the scheme is designed and is being delivered right across the whole of England and Wales. It's devolved and delivered separately in Scotland to provide support to those that need it most. Maximus, working with our delivery partners, are operating the Restart scheme across South and East London and in South and West Yorkshire, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, and we're one of 6 or 7 different prime providers who are delivering that scheme then right across the UK, as I said, in England and Wales. To be eligible, participants need to have been on the in-work benefit regime, essentially been out of work for between 12 and 18 months, and require additional support to help them back into employment. So ultimately, an individual who have been working with the job centres for that period of time will unfortunately, for a number of reasons, not been able to have secured employment, and so will then be referred across to us or the other prime providers of the Restart scheme to provide a more specialised or tailored package of support than the job centres are able to provide or in scope to provide. The scheme itself is, as I mentioned, huge. The expectation is that more than 1 million people will be referred through to the scheme and supported over the 3-year period of referrals and the 4-year period of the service overall. And all of those referrals, unlike some previous provisions where there are a variety of different access routes, all of those referrals of participants will come through Job Centre Plus. And so the eligibility will be selected and identified via that route. And so it comes back down to that navigation piece, which I can touch on shortly later. And then the final point on Restart is that the collaboration and alignment of services is a critical success factor. So the department is really keen, more so than I think we've seen in other provision, to actively encourage collaboration and partnership at a local level. So, as Devon mentioned, obviously Restart as a scheme is still very young. It's only being delivered now for just under 6 months, and so I thought it would be helpful to probably share a few early reflections as far as I can in terms of the experience today, and again how we've experienced the sort of developing economic situation in delivery of the scheme so far. So. The first thing to note is that we've seen a huge growth in the employment support sector. So after a period of quite high employment and therefore low levels of outsourced provision, The scale of the impact of the pandemic has meant that there has been an incredible growth in the numbers of people supporting individuals to find work. And Maximus and our partners alone have recruited over 1,000 new people already in this first 6 months to deliver the scheme. And that picture is mirrored right across the country as other providers have done the same, which is a huge positive as well. Many of our own employees have themselves found themselves out of work and as a result of the pandemic. So it's great to be able to provide that support directly, and those individuals bring that personalised experience to supporting others. We're really pleased to have already supported over 1,500 participants back into work across those two areas that we're delivering. And whilst we've seen actually a slightly lower number of people come through than we'd initially expected, not actually linked to the economic position, but I just think more the natural teething issues in getting new services up and running. The numbers of people we've actually been able to get into work has still been excellent, and I think that's a reflection of some of the stronger economic situation that we're seeing. And certainly our experience of that has been that it's been perhaps not quite as difficult to support some individuals into work as we thought, but clearly others will have had some greater barriers to that. Interestingly, one of the challenges we've found is getting is engaging people face to face. So the Restart scheme is fundamentally still a face-to-face service. So unlike JETS, for example, which is entirely delivered remotely that Devon mentioned earlier, Restart requires providers to meet with a participant at least monthly in person, and if not more, depending on individual need. And so one of the interesting barriers that we've identified is that we're getting quite high failure to attend rates in some areas. And I think a lot of that still is from the hangover of anxiety to come into the office. Often the majority of individuals that we've been working with job centres for the last 12 to 18 months haven't been required to go in as they would do normally as part of their job seeker commitments. And so it's been really interesting to try and navigate around that and give people the comfort to come in and see us where it's necessary. We've seen a real varied nature of the barriers, ranging from just a lack of confidence to relatively simple things like updating a CV. And given some of the uneven recovery of the labour market, we've been trying to work with participants to identify transferable skills or developing new skills that will allow them to perhaps pivot into new sectors that they've not previously worked in, but where there might not be the same level of employment opportunity that there was previously. Obviously, hospitality and retail, we all know, have been severely impacted, and so helping those individuals in those areas look at what other opportunities there could be that could still be suitable for them is one of the key challenges that we've faced. We've been working really closely with employers in partnership as well, and so we've been identifying hundreds of vacancies through our employer engagement teams. And again, one of the interesting observations that we've seen is actually employers are far more enthusiastic about coming and working with Maximus and I assume of the other providers as well on Restart, but due to the fact that it's the difficulties in hiring that we're seeing are far different than we initially anticipated. And so that active collaboration and appetite to work with Maximus on Restart has been really positive. And finally, we've had some really positive engagement with some local stakeholders and wider organisations. We work with a number of charity partners in collaboration to deliver this Restart scheme, as well as the local authorities and the boroughs in the areas that we're operating, Redbridge being a key one of those. Next slide, please. And that just briefly brings me on to the delivery in partnership. And so Maximus delivery model of the Restart scheme is absolutely that we want to work in a collaborative and joined up way as far as we're able to with local organisations, be that SMEs, third sectors, local authorities, provisions, and we've the primary route through which we're aiming to do that is what we're calling our community partnership network, and that's really a collection of organisations who share a view to provide positive services to the community and try and join up provision as best as we possibly can to ensure the best possible support for the individuals that we're engaging with. And Maximus will be or has ring-fenced several £1 million to invest in a community partnership network, so that first and foremost we'd be keen to draw on provision that's already available and funded, and so that we're maximising the value for the taxpayer and avoiding duplication. But where those funding streams don't exist, we've got the opportunities to invest in support that meets an individual's barriers and challenges to ultimately help them move back into work as quickly as possible. We're also keen to rebuild best practice and capacity. So we know that the organisations we're working with have probably operated in the areas that we're delivering services in for many years, and will likely be delivering services beyond the end of the restart scheme. So trying to leave a legacy and build capacity within those organisations far beyond the end of this scheme is a critical part of the appetite of working collectively together. Next slide, please. So I just thought, given that we're going to be hearing from some colleagues from Redbridge shortly, it'd be interesting to share some reflections that we've been seeing so far. And hopefully this is all as you understand it. So if I've got anything wrong here, I'm sure I'll be corrected shortly. But we know that the employment rate in Redbridge, particularly at the moment, is around 7%, which is higher than the London average at 5.6 and higher than the national average at 4.3. So we know that Redbridge particularly is being challenged around the level of unemployment, and there's potentially a lot of reasons behind that, which perhaps the team can talk about, or I can try and share more details on. Positively, though, what we've seen is in October, particularly around 12,000 job postings just in Redbridge in that month alone, which is about 40% more than we saw in September. So what that further illustrates is the degree of engagement and positive growth potentially that we're seeing, and working with those employers that are recruiting to support as many people into work as possible is a big part of that. The challenge being often where those roles are being recruited, and as you can see there, business, finance and legal make up the largest proportion overall of those roles, of around 3,200 of those postings in October. And so it's the trick is being able to work with the participants that we're supporting to understand where there are opportunities for them to move into those positions, and obviously where there isn't a direct like-for-like experience there, what can we do to help them develop those skills to move into those growth areas. And we have, as I've mentioned, seen participants moving back into work in a real broad spectrum of industries, including some of those listed there, as well as some really key positive employment partners around, such as Travelodge and Hilton and Amazon, Protocol Education, as some of the largest, but certainly the vast proportion of people that we're helping into work are through small localized organizations who are seeking to recruit now post-pandemic, and as things hopefully, Omicron aside, start to look a little bit more positive. One of the interesting barriers that we're seeing, particularly in Redbridge, is around ESOL needs, so individuals who perhaps English isn't their first language, and so trying to work with them to strengthen their ability to communicate, but also work with employers for whom often English isn't a primary requirement, and trying to identify where there are partners for whom those individuals have got a better chance of thriving and securing employment is one of the key areas of development that we've identified. And for those returning to work quickly, it's certainly what we've identified is certainly has been a result of the pandemic, and then sort of potentially being displaced from their roles as a result of that. And so whilst these individuals, as I say, have been out of work for between 12 and 18 months, often those relatively light touch focus interventions to just really fundamentally get underneath the barriers that they feel have been preventing them to getting to work up to this point has been the thing that we found has had the greatest impact in moving them back into work quickly, and has contributed to that 1,500 people that we've helped so far, which is fabulous. So rather than me talking now, what I'm hoping that you'll be able to see now is a short video, which is will do a much better job of illustrating some of the support that we've been able to offer than I can just by describing it. So if I pass over to the team, if you get that to run, Jane.
No problem at all. Let's just see. You should be getting the video up on your screen. And let me just.
It's working.
Thank you. I think I've just got one final slide then.
Yes,
so,
please.
oh, thanks very much. So, I mean, that's just one example, and hopefully a really, you find, like me, it's a really powerful message of the impact that this scheme and other schemes like it obviously have on helping people transform their lives. And so one of the things that we're really keen to do is continue to enhance and improve the services that we're delivering. And there were three things that I'd be keen to just leave you with in terms of the thoughts for the future of the scheme. So the first is really the evidence or building the evidence of what works to allow us to continuously improve the services we're offering, but ultimately, as I said before, leave a legacy for future programmes, so that the next round of provision that comes along, either procured locally or through central government, has some really positive and data-led learnings of what's working and how those can enhance future provision. We're really keen to look to work even more closely with our delivery partners and local organisations to explore new and different perhaps ways of joining up services and provision, and obviously working together with any new services that may come on board over the time that we're delivering the restart scheme. And finally, exploring the use of technology. Clearly, technology is over the last 18 months has been truly transformational in our ability to continue to collaborate and work together, this being a perfect example of that. And I think how finding ways to use technology to enhance the services that we're able to provide while still ensuring that no one is excluded or is unable to engage and support, I think is a critical area of focus for me and the team over the next few years. So keen to obviously work with all the sort of local organisations as well, who might also be exploring those areas, to see how we can join up on that. So that was everything. Sorry if I've run over slightly, but I'm more than happy to take any questions at the point where we get to that. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ayden. Really interesting, and quite a few questions have come in, which is fantastic. So, but with plenty of time for those towards the end. While I hand over, by way of handover from Ayden to our next speaker, Sunita from Redbridge, I would just like to serve our second poll for the audience to participate. And as you can see here, so the poll now, I'm going to be asking you, so it'll be coming up on your screen. We would like to, what is the biggest barrier to work? Is the answer that is what it should say there. So I do apologise, something's gone wrong with the poll there. So yes, if you could, we're really interested to hear from your point of view, what is the biggest barrier to work in your experience of people that you're working with? So hopefully you can see that on the screen. Coming in, yes, indeed. So the answers that we're asking you, is it that in your experience there are inflexible jobs and employers? Is the biggest barrier to work with the people you work with people that are dealing with mental health problems? Is it the lack of access to affordable childcare? Is it the perception of people feeling that they're going to be financially worse off in work? And is it the lack of tailored support to move into work? Really interested in your experiences from the people that you've been supporting so far. So I think that most people have voted now. So I'm going to close the poll and then ask Ayden and then Sunita to comment on those answers. So let me close the poll and then share the results on the screen. Hopefully you should be able to see them now. Ayden, what would you make of those responses?
It's interesting, yes, real mix there, isn't there? So I think the financial, being financially worse off in work is obviously a key challenge, and it's one that we know we obviously work closely with policy and practice to try and understand at the earliest part of the provision to understand and help participants understand, what sort of work they need to be looking for at what level in order to be better off, but really understanding that individually and all the nuances around the benefit system. I'd echo that sort of as a challenge that we've been seeing as well.
Interesting. Sunita, how about yourself?
Yes, definitely. As an advisor, I come across majority of these as being a barrier for our residents, particularly more and more mental health problems, as our residents are dealing with more than just helping to find work. They could be housing needs, they could be in debt. So mental health and anxiety definitely being financially worse off. We do see people who still have that fear of how work is going to impact on their benefits and housing. And this is why we have implemented the policy and practice calculator as a universal offer, supporting our residents and actually showing them and demonstrating to them the different scenarios of how work can impact on them. But yes, definitely all of these I've come across.
Brilliant, lovely. And I know you're going to talk in a bit more detail now, Sunita, so thank you very much for those comments, and thank you too, Ayden. So let me just close the poll and then hand over without further ado to Sunita first, and then Sally. I got that the wrong way around, so I do apologise. Over to you, Sunita. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Sunita Gunamal, and I'm one of the senior employment advisors for the Redbridge service. So my job is really to caseload residents and help them towards their journey into work. If you just move to the next slide. So Redbridge, we are the council's employment support and job brokerage service. And we provide information, advice and guidance to people who are looking for work, but also training, volunteering and self-employment. Residents, we can support any residents over the age of 18 in our borough. And the benefit of our service is that we can also help people who are employed. And I would say definitely over the last year, we've seen an increase of people who are employed who are needing our service, especially people whose jobs have been impacted by the pandemic. Their hours are being cut, their contracts have been cut, and a lot of people are looking for career progression because their sectors have been impacted, so they're kind of nervous about their future and wanting sort of looking at changing of careers. We've also seen a high number of graduates register with our service. So we've got a lot of graduates in our borough who are struggling to look for work. We also support our most vulnerable residents in the borough as a local authority. We feel it's really important that we do continue to support our long-term unemployed. And this is also part of the council's Think Work programme, where employment now forms an integral part of all our frontline council services. So officers, as part of their assessments in housing or children's services or benefits, they will discuss the residents' work situation as part of that assessment, and we've embedded processes where they can make a direct referral to our service. So we've seen a real increase in our internal referrals, which is really great as we continue to support some of those vulnerable residents. So as part of our service, we offer a wide range of support services to our residents, particularly as we're working with clients who are more job ready, who need very practical support around their CVs, careers advice and job search. So we do that. And we also work closely with employers, so we're able to provide access to local jobs, which I think has been a real benefit for our work ready cohorts, who what they really need is just a job. And if they can get into that job fairly easily without going through sort of rigorous assessment processes, it's really been a benefit. So a lot of those job vacancies really just need a CV and a cover letter, and then we put that forward to the employer, and we can then also talk to the employer. So somebody has a gap in their CV, but they're very motivated to work. We've been able to successfully place those people into jobs. For those who are more long-term unemployed, we do provide a more flexible approach. So we can work with them for up to 1 to 2 years. And a lot of the support is around confidence building, mentoring, coaching, and working very closely with our local partnerships, particularly in education, training, and the community and voluntary sector, which have been invaluable. We refer people to gain skills, to gain experience, but also with specialist support around, as I was saying, mental health and debt services. When somebody is in work, we continue to work with them for up to 12 months because we feel that we do need to continue for that length of time, because people have that first sort of 3 to 6 months is a real challenge for people when they start work. the impact it has on their benefits, but also on their lives. It's a very vulnerable time. So we think if we by supporting them for 12 months, it helps them to sustain their jobs, and we can also talk to them about career progression. The next slide. So I think we've covered some of the challenges and barriers in our borough. So we're still facing high levels of unemployment, even though over the last few months it has started to go down. It's still not the levels of pre-pandemic. So it's an average of 13,000 people on universal credit. We've not seen that increase following the end of the job retention scheme as predicted, which is positive, but it'd be interesting to see over the next 3 to 6 months whether there is any change in that. But the most affected in our borough is young people. We've seen a real rise in youth unemployment. As I said, we've got high numbers of graduates in our borough, and also those aged over 50 who are most likely been impacted by redundancy. Also a challenge in our borough, the communities that have been hardest hit are the BAME communities and those with disabilities and health issues. So in terms of the barriers, which I think we've touched on, a high number of language barriers and ESOL needs in our borough, as well as low basic skills, so literacy and numeracy skills. And we've also seen a challenge around digital access. So I've seen people trying to use their mobile phones to upload their CV, having very limited access to data with Wi-Fi, which is a real challenge when you're actually looking for work. For the newly unemployed, as I said, we've seen a lot of people who are a bit unsure about their future careers, want a change of careers, having to upskill and retrain, but also the digital skills, because now it is a challenge looking for work. You need to have good IT skills and to navigate the job market, and doing things like virtual interviews, which we've been offering everybody, almost like mock virtual interviews, to make sure that they can connect and have the right IT facilities. We've definitely seen a fear of, particularly our most vulnerable and long-term unemployed, the fear of the impact of work on their benefits, which is very understandable. And so we do find it hard to engage some of our long-term unemployed. But what we brought into our offer is a pre-assessment and integrated offer, which Sally will talk more about. So we can identify some of those other wider barriers, and we can put in measures such as the policy and practice calculator to help those individuals really see the impact of being financially independent on particularly their housing options. And we've got a case study to show you to demonstrate that. Also, there is a mismatch between the jobs that people are looking for and the jobs available in our borough. So I know we said there's jobs in IT and business and finance, but a lot of those jobs, the people that we're working with are not ready for. That's kind of more longer term aspirations. The kind of jobs that are available and their employers are struggling to recruit are around health and social care and hospitality, but the people we're working with don't particularly want those jobs. So there's a bit of a mismatch around that, and we're doing more with employers to promote their sectors. And unfortunately, the people who we've seen are going into work are still struggling financially. So we're still seeing that in-work poverty. They're in either low-paid jobs or insecure jobs, zero-hour contracts. We're still seeing a lot of that in our borough. So there's still that cycle of people going in and out of employment. Next slide, please. So in terms of our recovery response, the local authority Redbridge, we're part of a strategic partnership with DWP, Maximus, our Redbridge Institute, which is our adult college, and New City College. And as part of the recovery plan, it's based on a number of key elements. And I think we've talked about having an integrated and coordinated approach, which again we feel is really important, so the resident knows where to access support and can access it at the right time. We're also going to be targeting our support for the newly unemployed, the young people, the 50+, but also those with health issues, people from Black and ethnic minority groups, people on low earners, and those on insecure contracts. We'll be focusing on sectors in our borough where we know there are skill shortages and recruitment needs, particularly around construction, as I said, health and social care, hospitality, and some of the new emerging sectors like the green economy. And we'll be focusing on social value, so trying to maximise, where possible, employment and apprenticeship opportunities through our social value commitments. Next slide. So I just wanted to put into context some of the actions that we've put in place to help key cohorts. So for our newly unemployed and 50 plus, we've always had a really strong partnership with our Adult Institute, but we've strengthened that even more. The college have responded really well by putting on more digital courses, employability courses, and CPD, which is continuous professional development online courses. And this has been really valuable for those people who are work ready, just to sort of build on their skills and gain qualifications. We've also got a very good relationship, partnership with the National Career Service. So we have a dedicated diary with the National Career Service advisor who can talk to our residents about career changing, the local labour market across London, what's the changing landscape for employment and recruitment, as well as providing redundancy support. We work really closely again with our Redbridge and community voluntary sector, which again has been very, very valuable. We've been able to promote lots of volunteering opportunities, which has given people experience, particularly if they are thinking about changing careers. So it gives them exposure to different types of opportunities. One of the benefits I think we have being part of the council is that we can refer our residents to our council housing advisors and our benefits advisors at a very early stage. So as soon as they tell us, actually, I'm in private accommodation, I'm really behind on my rent, I'm at risk of eviction, we can refer them very quickly to get early advice to try and prevent them from becoming homeless. And also around benefits entitlement, because if you're newly unemployed, don't quite know what you're entitled to, we've been able to refer to our benefits as well as Redbridge Citizens Advice so they can understand the whole range of kind of benefits and what they're entitled to. One of the things we've also implemented over the last year is a collaboration with our internal HR in the council. So we now have exclusive access to a number of job vacancies, particularly around admin, customer support, facilities. So those jobs are pretty much come to us to work Redbridge. So we have an opportunity to fill them with our caseload of residents. And that's really, really worked well. And we've been able to fill a number of council roles with local people. We've also developed a talent bank. So for our more job ready cohorts, we put them into a talent pool and we're able to promote their skills and experience directly to employers through our recruitment service. And as I mentioned, our social value partners have really come on board. They've delivered a range of workshops to our residents, particularly around getting into certain sectors. We've had sessions on LinkedIn, networking. These have been really added value workshops for our residents. And the next slide. So for our young people in the borough, as I said, we've got a high number of young people, particularly graduates who are struggling to find work. The council is a gateway provider for the government scheme. We've provided a number of placements within the borough, within the council, but also within our schools and our contractors. And already we've seen good progression outcomes. So a number of young people have now got paid full-time jobs in the council or really good jobs externally. We've also launched the Redbridge Virtual Youth Hub, which is on the council's platform, which has been a joint project with our Redbridge Connections and the Council of Youth Services, so that young people can access really valuable advice around employment, education, health, well-being, managing your money. We send out regular resources such as our apprenticeship pack and our graduate resources, lots of graduate opportunities. And we're working alongside Redbridge Citizens Advice around their youth innovation project, so we can really understand what the needs of our young people are, what the barriers are, and how we can provide them with quality advice and support. I'll just pass you on to Sally, who's going to talk to you more about our integration with housing.
Good morning, my name's Sally Davy. I'm the Work Redbridge Housing Integration Officer. As Sunita's mentioned, we have a Think Work programme. Under the programme, 2 new integration officer posts have been created, one with a focus on housing referrals and one with a focus on referrals from the welfare benefit team, although the 2 roles frequently overlap. The key purpose of my role is to embed the Work Redbridge employment offer across the housing service, building a relationship with officers by exchanging information and providing feedback to ensure that employment is discussed with residents by frontline staff at every appropriate opportunity. 5 key cohorts were identified where referrals are particularly encouraged, in the hope that finding employment will help residents to be more financially independent, improve their housing options, sustain their tenancies, improve mental health, and in turn reduce demand on statutory and voluntary sector services. The cohorts identified are clients with personal housing plans. One of the main housing referrals is from the Housing Solutions Officer, where they create the personal housing plan under the prevention and relief duty. Another key area are clients affected by the benefit cap, clients in temporary accommodation, tenants in arrears, and residents who are struggling and relying on discretionary housing payments and hardship payments. Sunita mentioned previously, but the introduction of a pre-assessment by the integration officers on receipt of a referral has meant a focus on the wider support needs of the client, and the potential barriers to work can be considered at an earlier stage, and referrals made to the partners already discussed. One of the key tools to demonstrate how a client can be better off in work and to help with the decision-making process is to show them their particular situation on the better off calculator. Next slide, please. This is a case study of a gentleman that I met when I very first started. As I say, I started back in August, and I met this gentleman in early September when I was going to meet the hostel support workers, basically just on an introductory visit. But I'm going to call the gentleman Mr. A, but I met Mr. A when he was actually moving into the hostel with his wife and his 3 children. When I first meet with a client, I try to start building a relationship. We chatted a bit about his personal situation, but I also advise about the housing situation in Redbridge. The fact that Redbridge has the 2nd lowest council stock in London, and therefore we rely heavily on the private rented sector to fulfil our duties. I talk about the local housing allowance and the possibility of the benefit cap affecting their situation, but how work can improve this. With Mr. A, he advised me that he'd not worked for 3 years. He'd previously been in sales, but he'd felt under pressure with the targets. He talked about starting his own interior design business, but didn't really have a business plan. He explained that his wife was taking a hairdressing course, but she struggled with English, and he felt restricted as he was taking care of the children, only one of which was in school. And by sitting down and breaking down the barriers, we could focus on achievable steps and prioritise the immediate situation, which was the housing situation. Can I have the next slide, please? With Mr. A, I created 3 scenarios on the calculator. The first is the family of 5 in hostel accommodation in 1 room with a communal kitchen and communal bathroom facilities. Many residents don't realise, but in hostel accommodation, which is supported, the benefit cap doesn't apply. Mr. A didn't realise this. So here we can see on the right in yellow that Mr. A's surplus for the month after housing costs have been deducted were £1,400 for food and bills. However, if we move on to the second scenario, which is the one where it says private rented, out of work with the benefit cap of £937, which is the actual breakdown which is showed to the left, and we can see that I went on to discuss how matters would change if he were to move into private rented accommodation in the local local area, even at the local housing allowance. The breakdown on the left relates to this scenario and shows the benefit cap. Here, Mr. A is left with just £500 for the month for food and bills, which is clearly not affordable for a family of 5, and obviously presented a barrier to him moving out of the hostel. The third scenario on the right again shows the situation in the private rented accommodation, but now Mr. A is in employment, earning just £617 per month, but this is sufficient to lift the benefiting cap and improve his situation. Now he has £1,800 for food and bills after the housing costs are taken. I explained that affordability is ultimately the key, as we can't set people up to fail. With him taking on the employment, we're now able to look for helping him into the private sector, assisting him with a move, helping him with rent deposits, rent in advance. But it was something that we couldn't really consider previously. After my meeting, Mr. A met with a work advisor who assisted him in creating a new CV and did a targeted job search. Quite quickly after that, Mr. A secured a part-time job in the local B&M store. As I say, his earnings were sufficient to lift the benefit cap, and the housing service have now been able to assist him into private rented accommodation. Mr. A will continue to be supported by his work advisor and has already progressed to a supervisory role. Mrs. A is also engaging with Redbridge. She's been introduced to the Children's Centre. She's enrolled in an everyday English course, and the children go to the creche there while she's taking the English classes. Can I take the next slide, please? With regards to the future plans, we did an exercise to look at work outcomes over the last 18 months, but we found that looking at the job outcomes, quite a few of the clients were actually no longer working. This was obviously a concern, hence we've now tried to strengthen our in-work support, preparing clients for the changes to be faced in advance of taking work. The benefit calculators are useful to show the financial benefit of being in work, but to date we've not really focused on the negative aspects of being in work. For example, where things like the free school meals are lost. At present, we rely on referrals from our other services, as I say, housing and welfare benefits, but in the future we hope to use the LIFT data to proactively search for clients who will benefit most from the work Redbridge offer. And finally, the aim is to, with the help of our employment advisors, to help residents progress with their careers and into better paid jobs and better work conditions. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Sally. Thank you so much for that. And also Sunita as well. Thank you ever so much. So your contact details are here on the screen if anybody wants any more details. And of course, the slides will be shared with everybody afterwards. So yes, thank you ever so much. I'm mindful of time, so I want to hand over now to my colleague, Ed McNamara. Over to you, Ed. Thank you.
Oh. Hello everyone, thank you very much, Janet. My name's Ed McNamara. I'm one of the account managers here at Policy and Practice. I spend my time with employment programme, housing associations and charities, and I was in charge of a lot of the onboarding that we had with the whole restart programme, and additionally I onboarded also the work Redbridge teams as well. What I want to go through today is some of the features that they spoke about on the calculator, just a nice short outlook of what we were doing, and one of the first features I wanted to clarify on the calculator that we provide is the discretionary support, where we highlight those that are next to the additional benefits that they can get. That's all about maximising their income and making sure that people are making ends meet. Because benefits is complicated. Not everyone knows what's there and is available to them. And sometimes that's the difference between getting food on the table or not that month. So we were looking at making sure that we're making an impact to their lives, highlighting everything that we can do to improve their situation. And on the next slide, we'll be looking at the scenarios tab, which is one of the core features that I ensured that all the restart program were using within their clientele. So the first thing we were doing was looking at different employment situations and simulating the outcomes of those decisions that they might have to make. So we would show them their unemployed situation, which we have on the left of the graph there. We compared it to a job opportunity within one sector, and then a job opportunity with another area. And then we could actually go a step further than that and just looking at what the different salaries would be, but actually what are the hidden costs of moving back into work. And I'm sure many of you know, as you move employment, you have to think about the distance, how am I going to take care with my childcare, what I'm going to do about the fuel costs. And in reality, sometimes the higher paid jobs aren't necessarily the best options for them. So we made a simulation where a job opportunity in Leicester paid more than a job opportunity in Nuneaton for this client. But in reality, due to the fact that Nuneaton was closer and the cost would be less, that the money at the end of the month, the money that really matters, was actually a lot higher under the Nuneaton job that we had on the scenario on the right here. So we really took the step further of just instead of showing you different incomes and different salaries of jobs, we make sure that we're taking a full picture and a holistic look into the actual client situation. And on the next slide here, we're having a look at what we can do with those who are with fluctuating incomes. And within the Restart program, we found a fair few that were going into jobs that may have been 4 weekly or 0-hour contracts, or those who are self-employed, who had fluctuating incomes, which would then make sure that universal credit payments started to fluctuate as well. And not many of our clients knew that, and not many of the end users, the people being impacted by this, knew that. And so we were there making sure that there was a tool available to make sure there was no surprise shorter payments than people expected. So we have here on the right a calendar that we would have on the calculator, and we would enter in the different fluctuating incomes we had per month, and then highlight which month it would suddenly drop and say, well, make sure that you know, for example, on this, what we have here, February 17th, that your payment's going to drop by a couple £100 due to your working hours. So it's just a great way to make sure that less people are falling into financial risk, and we're giving the best accurate support that we can do for our clients. And that's the 3 main features I want to go through today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ed. And I know that you're going to give a very short live demo of the calculator with a case study after the Q&A. So thank you for that. And people, I'm sure, will be very interested. Yeah, so I just wanted to end, before we move on to the Q&A, just to sum up the webinar and the stuff that we've spoken about today. So as Davy mentioned, over a fifth of the working age population is economically inactive, and government is tackling this with nearly £7 billion of employment support and changes to universal credit. So the changes to the labour market see job opportunities in different sectors, but this actually means that people need to adapt and reskill. We've heard that the system is complex, and we've heard that software can help to reduce this and help people to focus on the right things in conversations as well. And indeed, once in work, staying and progressing there is the next focus, certainly for Redbridge. So thank you very much to our key speakers today. Delighted to have you. And I would like everybody to stick around and just for the Q&A. So if I can ask people to turn on their microphones and their cameras. I have some really interesting questions from our audience that I'm really excited to pass over to you. So everybody's here, that's fantastic. Okay, let me just start off. I think, Devon, this is quite a hard one, so I'll start with you on this one, if that's okay. Apologies in advance. But this, and I think it's an interesting point actually. This person has said, in referral to your points, that the increase in wage retention is a false incentive, as this means claimants withdraw earlier from UC entitlement, as the more they earn, the less UC they receive until there is no entitlement. This often means the loss of passported benefits and incentive, which keep the claimant afloat financially. What would you say to that point?
I mean, I get the point that if your earnings go up, you might lose some support either through benefits or in particular through passported benefits. And we've argued for a long time that you should be able to get, for example, free school meals for as long as you're on universal credit. It's just a much simpler system and much more rewarding. So it's really these cliff edges. But overall, I'm not sure that I agree, because you do want people to earn more. I mean, that's something that you definitely want people to do. So for people to be able to move into work, increase their earnings, yes, their benefits fall a little bit as a result, but they're better off overall, because although their benefits have fallen, it's because the earned income has gone up. So their overall take-home income is much higher. And it's these kinds of scenarios and points that I think the calculator really brings out. And I just wanted to say as well, before questions for Ayden and Sunita, I thought the case studies that you guys and Sally brought forward were just absolutely brilliant and really brought the work that you guys do to life.
Yeah, lovely, thanks, Devon. A question here for Ayden. This person asks, regarding face-to-face, is there flexibility given that you are aware of pandemic anxiety about face-to-face, attending face-to-face? Also, have you considered issues around attending in person? So transportation, especially if a royal customer, and the upfront costs of travel. These are some of the typical barriers which prevent attendance. What would you say to that, Ayden?
Absolutely, thanks. So yes, there is flexibility in the scheme to allow individuals to engage in means other than face-to-face. If the individual has particular barriers linked to health or anxiety, we have the opportunity to look to engage with that individual on a virtual basis rather than have them come into the office, with a view that we would be trying to work with them to get them to a point where they're confident to engage with us in person, because ultimately the majority of employments still will require some level of travel to offices. Not all, but certainly the proportion. So the department have made those flexibilities open to us to try and account for some of that. In terms of barriers to engage in person, yes, we fully accept that the costs of travel to come to see us can be a challenge, and so Maximus and other Restart Prime providers will pay for any requirements to enable participants to join us. So travel costs, childcare costs, and other associated costs that the participant would incur in the interest of gaining support are things that we can provide support with.
Brilliant. Anything to add there, Sunita? Thanks, Ayden. From Redbridge's point of view on that question. What's that, Sunita? Sorry, I think you might be muted. Let's double check. There you go. Try again now. Sorry, Sunita.
That's okay. So yeah, very similar. We wouldn't force anyone to come and see us. We do outreach in the community. So if an individual is apprehensive and doesn't want to come out to see us, we will offer them a telephone or virtual appointment. But we do try and encourage, at least for that first appointment, for it to be face-to-face, because it just helps us to really understand the individual needs. You get a lot from body language and kind of face-to-face interaction. But if they really can't come in and don't want to come in to see us, then we wouldn't force them to come in at all.
Yeah, brilliant, lovely, thanks, Sunita. Another question for you, Ayden. This person asks, can I ask how Restart engages with housing associations?
Yeah, so we actually worked quite hard with communities that work, who I think represent a number of the housing associations in the UK, particularly the employability elements of those housing associations, throughout our conceptualising stage of how we wanted to deliver Restart, to try and understand how best to collaborate. But it's one of the areas when looking forward, it's an area that we haven't had as much opportunity to engage with so far. I think, as Devon mentioned, we're very early days in terms of the delivery of this scheme, and so getting things up and running has been one of the priorities. But I'm really passionate personally about working closely with housing associations, because clearly a lot of the residents of housing associations will be similar customers to those perhaps that we'll be working with on the Restart scheme. So the short answer is not as much as I'd like to at this stage, but certainly it's something that I'm keen to do. So if you represent a housing association, or if there are any on the webinar today, please do feel free to reach out to us, and we can have a conversation about how we might be able to do that.
Lovely, thank you, Ayden. Sunita, you talked in your piece about your work with private sector landlords, and indeed, Redbridge having the second lowest council stock in London. What about housing associations in Redbridge? How do you work with them?
So I guess direct work Redbridge, we don't work with them around kind of the housing needs, but I guess our housing services would do. But with Work Redbridge, we work with housing associations, particularly when they're providing employability support. So a number of housing associations we know, particularly L&Q, we work with them really closely, because we share activities with them, refer to them, shared some really great job opportunities. So we refer to housing associations when we know a lot more housing associations are starting to support their residents. But I guess our housing departments would work more closely with them around kind of housing needs and anything around rent and anything around homelessness.
Lovely, thanks very much, Sunita. I'm cantering through these questions. I hope this is okay. Another question back to yourself, Ayden. So this person asks, and then perhaps come back to you on the same point, Sunita. This person asks, when you're helping a person for whom English is not their first language, do you routinely use interpreters or expect that person to learn English?
No, certainly not. I mean, whilst clearly it's helpful within the UK employment market to be able to have some grasp of English, certainly we wouldn't expect someone to be able to learn English in the time that it takes for us to offer meaningful support. So yeah, we have a range of solutions through sort of a national partnership with a big word who can provide remote interpreting services, as well as where needed localized interpreting services to ensure that we can offer the support that an individual needs that in a way that they're able to comprehend and fully take benefit of.
Perfect, thank you. How about yourself, Sunita?
Yeah, we come across that a lot actually. We get referrals from people who's really difficult to communicate. So we would bring in sort of interpreters to support with that. We're very fortunate as well in our team. We have people who can speak a variety of languages. So where we can support internally, then we will, because I think that's always just nice to sort of build that relationship and trust with that individual. But where we can't meet that language barrier, we will bring in interpreters.
Brilliant, lovely, thank you. I have a question here. Thank you, Sunita and Ayden. I have a question here, Devon, that I'm going to put to you, if that's okay. And then I'm very mindful of the time. But this question says, would you consider that there is a case for universal basic income or something similar to encourage people to take up jobs in sectors in need? What would your thoughts be on a policy point there, Devon?
It's quite a broad question to end on, and I'd say universal credit does a good job, and the way to make universal credit more like universal basic income is to remove barriers to it, like the savings limit. That means some people aren't able to access it. The relationship between that and employment support and work in the right sectors is really about being better off in work. Doesn't resolve imbalances between sectors, and it doesn't resolve skills imbalances either. So really, in that sense, it's very much the work of Ayden, Sunita, and many others like them across the country to help people build the confidence to develop their skills and point them in the right direction where there are strong employment opportunities available. And being better off in work is definitely a big part of that. But if there are big imbalances between sectors, they don't just automatically get resolved because you're better off in all of those sectors. But actually, what you need is the skills to be able to take them up. Hopefully that answers it, but quite a broad question.
It was a bit mean, sorry. But yeah, thank you very much to the person that posted that question. So we have got more questions, but I'm very mindful of time, and I want to make sure that people sort of head on their way in plenty of time. So for those people whose questions we've not got to right now, I'm going to take them offline. I'm going to pass them back to our speakers and ask them to give a response to you. So I do apologise in advance, but I'd like to leave the Q&A there, if I may, and then hand back to my colleague Ed. Thank you very much to our guest speakers. What I want to do right now is hand over to, a few next steps before handing over to Ed. No, actually, do you know what? I'm going to hand over to Ed right now, who's going to give us a demo, a very, very brief demo of the Policy and Practice Calculator. So Ed, if that's okay, let me send you the details.
Nita, Ed, thank you so much for that, and to everyone attending for the questions. Ed, looking forward to your demo. Cheers.
Wonderful.
This should come up on your screen now, Ed.
Oh, there we go. Just going to check the audience view. Is that working?
Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so hi everyone, me again, Ed from Policy and Practice. So my main aim today is just to show you in more detail quickly what type of work we've done. So you saw those slides earlier, so stick around if you want to hear more about and see more like a visual guide of what we do with the Restart programme and all employment sectors within councils and all welfare to work charities as well. So this is the benefit and budget calculator login page that we supply to organisations. What I'm going to do is log into the calculator that is browser based, and all you need is access to the internet and your login details that you purchase from us. And yeah, it works on all up-to-date browsers and devices. What I'm going to do is quickly open a case that I've saved here that we use for employment sector, and I can type in the case of an individual I've already seen. So I'm going to type in my client Peter Butler. I'm going to load up his case, and it just means that I don't have to re-enter any information I've already got stored on him. I can just quickly open it back up and go straight from where I left off and open up any client's cases that have been done with my colleagues as well. In this test case, I've simulated a situation where Peter Butler is an unemployed single dad, and we're going to simulate job situations that he might have within Leicester and Nuneaton. So what I did was I added a scenario which copied all the information over, and I tweaked it to simulate those job opportunities, the different costs and the different incomes. I'm going to move on to the results page to show the impact that we do with our clients and what the next steps we take. So firstly, we'll about that income maximization conversation about what is he currently facing? What is his situation where he's unemployed, and what can we do to take the next steps to move out those who are potentially in financial crisis? So the big, nice, bold banner, we say that this is how much they should be getting as a total income according to the information provided. We then break it down into further detail, saying how we came about that information. And then we take these notifications. And you saw a quick screenshot of it earlier, but I think I'd go into a little bit more detail now just to show you what type of information we provide. And the great thing about the restart scheme is that because it's so broad, we get a variety of capabilities there of our advisors, some with benefit experience, some with less benefit experience. But the great thing about this is that you don't actually need to be a benefit expert to give expert advice. So a lot of advisors will lean on the information we provided, such as we know that in this case, my individual is not claiming universal credit, is indeed better off under universal credit. And a full explanation of what that's like and what the move is like is provided. Additionally, we find things around the benefits that are currently not obtaining that could be maximizing their income. For example, a reduced price Wi-Fi tariff where Virgin Media and BT are offering a deal for those on universal credit. So things we don't think about, and especially if you're seeing loads of people per day, you won't remember every time, but this is a great way to quickly find out what can we do to make sure that not only are we making sure that they're getting everything they can in universal credit, but those things that are small percentages that are the differences between someone making ends meet that month. And if I scroll down, I'll show you exactly what we did with the Restart program and pretty much the bread and butter of the Restart advisors that we've been working with. So as I said, I created a situation where he's as an unemployed single dad, and that's shown on the little graph on the left here. We've got his current situation. The central graph we find here, a job opportunity in Leicester, which pays around £21,000 per year and pays a lot more than a job opportunity in Nuneaton, which only pays, I believe, around £19,000 per year. Standard advisor would say, well, there we go, that's the job for you, the job in Leicester, you're better off in work, and this is what we want you to go for, which is great. And if you're not got much time, that's also a great form of support you can give. But we give you the opportunity to go that level deeper and give more holistic advice on what their situation could be and highlight hidden costs of moving back into work. So what we can see here, this job in Leicester is actually a lot further away for the client, which means he has to spend more on childcare, more on his fuel, and things that I imagine everyone else has experienced when you're moving to job, that sometimes a higher paycheck doesn't mean higher money at the end of the month. So if I go to surplus and shortfall, we can see actually when we compare the costs to the income and look at the money left at the end of the month, the money that really matters, that's going to their disposable income, we can see that the job in Nuneaton, despite paying less, is actually the better job for them. And it's just another tool that we can give to you in order to make sure that you're giving quality, expert and accurate advice that is true to their situation. Another tool we use is the change in earnings slider, which is our wage slider, which is a quick way to show that moving back into employment is always going to be usually a better off option for them. And it's a quick, accurate way to show that. So as I said, my client's currently unemployed. And I can say, well, let's say a simulated job where you paid the national minimum wage of £9.50. And let's say you picked up a part-time job where you're only paying working 10 hours per week. Well, if you got that job, you'd be better off by £298, and that's just a part-time job. And that already pushes him out of the board of financial crisis where he's got a negative cash shortfall. So what can we do if we put him into full-time employment and moved him to 38 hours on national minimum wage? Well, we can see he's better off by £729. It's a great, quick, easy way to show confidently that, according to this client's information, that he would be better off in work and how much by. And this includes the fluctuation of his benefits, so you don't have to figure out yourselves. So for example, you can see that his universal credit amount has dropped, and we can tackle that age-old barrier of those who are concerned that I don't want to move back into employment because I'm scared it's going to reduce my benefits, well, we can quickly highlight, well, actually, just even though that your benefits is reducing, you're going to be better off moving back into work. And the final thing I want to quickly show you is the Universal Credit Calendar, which I spoke of earlier. Let me just create a situation here. Under the Universal Credit Calendar, this is where we're looking at a regular income of the individual. So this is a standard situation where he's getting paid the same amount each month, and that's great. That's easy to understand, and we can move on from there. But what happens if they are paid 0 hours contract, or they are self-employed on a 4-hour or weekly contract, where the benefits fluctuate per month? Well, we can show those who are on a regular income by ticking yes here. We scroll down and we enter different amounts of income he's getting according to that month. Let's say he's got different wages and it goes up and it goes down. We've entered that in to look at this. And the graph calendar we have here shows you that as his income is fluctuating, so does his benefits, and we highlight when it fluctuates, how it fluctuates, and so there's no surprises and no one spiraling into a cash shortfall and not making ends meet that month because they expected more money from Universal Credit. So an immensely useful tool, basically there to firstly help impact your clients and make sure that they are better off with the advice you give, and secondly making your lives and your advisors' lives a lot easier, because doing this individually per month would take a lot of time, and we're doing it in a couple of seconds. If there's anything you'd like to find more, any questions additional you want to give to me, feel free to always reach out to us at Policy and Practice. I'm always happy to pick up a call and go through some of the work we've done at the Restart programme. But that in essence is some of the tools that we've used to impact those looking for jobs and better off employment with Restart and Work Redbridge. Janet, I'm happy with that there.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Ed. A very quick counter through our tool, but it's always good to see it live, and I'm sure you've given people some incentive to get in touch and to yeah, have a look themselves. So let me make myself the presenter now. I think that should come back to me, and hopefully people can see my screen. There we go. Brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ed. So very quickly, some next steps. I mentioned there right at the very beginning that there's a download in the panel on the right hand side, and that is our Policy and Practice product brochure. So if you're interested and you want to take a look, please do. You can find out more about the calculator as we've talked about today, and also our Lift platform that we've mentioned as well, and the other products that we have. And there's some really interesting case studies from other clients in that brochure that you might be interested in. When you get these slides, which you will get automatically after the webinar, along with the recording, you might wish to check out these very short videos about the calculator and about Lift, just to give you a little bit of a recap and share them with your colleagues. When I close the webinar very shortly, there'll be a survey, as I mentioned, and this is where our opportunity to ask feedback from you, so please do give it. We do really appreciate it. But also you can ask further questions of our speakers there if you didn't get a chance during the webinar. You can request a follow-up call, as Ed said, to chat about any of the products shown today, and get a one-to-one with Ed taking you through it. And there's also the chance to automatically register for our next webinar at the end of January. Feels like a lifetime away, but it won't. I'm sure it'll come up very soon. And that's going to be on budgeting support, best practice ways to help low-income households. Yeah, so that's the next steps for everybody today. That was the calculator, which Ed has just talked to. So the final slide is a very sincere thank you to our guest speakers. I hope you agree with me that what we've heard today has just been really interesting. And so thank you very much to Ayden from Maximus, Sally Davy and Sunita Gunamal from Work Redbridge, and indeed to my colleagues Devin Galani and Ed McNamara from Policy and Practice. I do hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. Thanks ever so much to our speakers, and I hope to see you on a Policy and Practice webinar again soon. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.